I stood frozen beneath the golden chandeliers of Blake Easton's extravagant Beverly Hills mansion. My fingers clutched around the ridiculous gift bag he'd just handed me, a glittery pink coin purse shaped like a cupcake. Across the room, a crowd of influencers and socialites applauded as Blake's mother, Diane, squealed with delight at the sight of a brand new Tesla Model X, wrapped in a custom white bow. The car was a gift, a grand gesture from Blake to his real mom, as he'd called her on the microphone, just moments before the valet rolled the vehicle into the courtyard. Me? I was standing in the corner, invisible, holding a $12 novelty trinket and a heartbreak so deep it nearly split me in two. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. But the next morning, I walked into his penthouse and left something behind that made his wife scream like a banshee. And that was just the beginning. The night of the Easton Foundation Gala had started like any other high society event I'd been dragged to since Brianna married Blake. I'd spent hours selecting an outfit that wouldn't embarrass my niece, a modest navy dress I'd saved 3 paychecks to afford. I'd even splurged on having my hair styled at a salon, wanting to look presentable among Beverly Hills elite. "Auntie Frances, you look beautiful," Brianna had said when she picked me up, though her eyes darted nervously over my outfit, checking for flaws. At 52, I wasn't expected to dazzle, but I'd hoped to at least blend in. "Remember, there will be press there. Just stick close to me, okay?" That should have been my first warning. When we arrived at the Easton estate, cameras flashed at the entrance. Reporters called out to Brianna and Blake, who posed effortlessly, their Hollywood smiles never faltering. I stood awkwardly to the side until an event coordinator gently ushered me through a side entrance. "Family members without press credentials can enter here," she'd explained with practiced kindness that stung worse than outright dismissal. Inside, the mansion had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Crystal snowflakes hung from ceilings so high they seemed to touch the stars. Ice sculptures glistened beside tables laden with champagne fountains and caviar stations. Waitstaff in crisp white uniforms floated through the crowd carrying trays of delicacies I couldn't name. I spotted Diane Easton. Immediately, her platinum blonde hair styled into a perfect updo, diamonds dripping from her ears and neck, her red gown clinging to her surgically enhanced figure. She air-kissed celebrities and tech moguls, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. "Frances," she'd said when she eventually noticed me, her voice dripping with the same false sweetness she'd perfected over the 2 years since Brianna and Blake's wedding. "So glad you could make it. The help's entrance is actually around back, but never mind." She'd laughed then, touching my arm as if we were sharing a joke. 3 nearby socialites tittered politely. "I'm family," I'd said quietly, forcing a smile. "Brianna's guardian. Her mother. Her aunt," Diane corrected swiftly. "Let's be accurate, shall we? Blood is blood." As if she'd forgotten that Blake was adopted, an irony I never pointed out. For 25 years, I had raised Brianna as my own after my sister Nicole died of lymphoma. I'd worked double shifts cleaning houses in Beverly Hills, skipped meals, postponed dreams, and deferred my own life to ensure Brianna had every opportunity. When she got into Stanford, I'd sold my mother's wedding ring to help cover what the scholarships didn't. When she landed her first PR job, I'd stayed up all night ironing her outfits for the first week. But now, standing in Blake's mansion, I was just the help who'd forgotten her place. The evening progressed with speeches about the Easton Foundation's charitable work, building tech centers in underprivileged schools, providing coding scholarships for minority students. Noble causes funded by tax write-offs and celebrated with 500 per-plate dinners. And now, the MC had announced, a special moment from our host, Blake Easton. Blake took the stage, handsome in his tailored tuxedo, his smile dazzling under the spotlights. Cameras from luxury magazines and social media influencers turned toward him. "Tonight is about giving back," he'd said, his voice smooth and practiced. "But it's also about recognizing those who shaped us, who made us who we are." A collective awe rippled through the crowd. "First, I want to honor the woman who taught me about strength, ambition, and never settling for less than excellence." An assistant wheeled out a large gift, elegantly wrapped in silver paper with a massive white bow. "Mom," Blake said, looking directly at Diane, "you've always pushed me to dream bigger, reach higher. You've been the queen of our family legacy." Diane pretended to be surprised, her hand fluttering to her chest as she approached the stage. "For the queen, nothing but the best," Blake continued, signaling to the valet. The crowd parted as the massive doors to the courtyard opened, and there it was, a gleaming white Tesla Model X, custom detailed with the Easton logo subtly incorporated into its design. Diane screamed with delight, rushing to hug her son as photographers captured the moment. The crowd erupted in applause. Someone whispered, "Must be worth at least $150,000 with those customizations." I clapped politely, though my heart raced with anxiety. I hadn't expected to receive anything at all, but Blake was turning toward me now, a smaller package in his hands. "And for Francis," he said, his voice shifting slightly, "who has always been frugal." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Always saving every penny," he continued, smirking. "A perfect little something for her little coins." More laughter, louder this time. I felt hundreds of eyes on me as I walked forward, my legs wooden, my face frozen in a polite smile that hurt my cheeks. When Blake handed me the small gift bag, pink and glittery with a cartoon cupcake on it, someone nearby whispered, "Is that from Claire's?" I peeked inside. A coin purse shaped like a cupcake stared back at me, its plastic sequins catching the light. $12, if that. "Thank you," I managed, my voice steady even as something inside me crumbled. Blake patted my shoulder condescendingly. "No need to save up for a Tesla, Francis. You've got a perfectly good room in our guest house." The crowd laughed again. I saw Brianna in the corner, looking away, pretending to check her phone. I returned to my corner, coin purse clutched in my hand, and stayed there for exactly 45 more minutes, long enough not to cause a scene by leaving immediately. Then I called a rideshare and slipped out through the same side entrance I'd come in through. In the back seat of the stranger's car, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply looked at the ridiculous coin purse and made a decision. 25 years of sacrifice deserved more than becoming a punchline. The next morning, I would remind them exactly who I was. My alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., same as it had for the past 30 years of my life. Old habits die hard even when you live in a luxurious guest house on a Beverly Hills estate. I made my bed with hospital corners, brewed a single cup of coffee, and sat at the small kitchen table, watching the sun rise over the immaculate gardens that I wasn't allowed to tend to. Blake had professionals for that. Last night's humiliation sat heavy in my chest, but I didn't allow myself to wallow. Instead, I reached for the locked drawer in my desk where I kept my most precious possessions. The key hung around my neck, hidden beneath my clothes, always close to my heart. Inside the drawer was a worn leather box containing 2 decades of memories, photographs, report cards, handwritten notes, and financial records. The evidence of a life dedicated to another human being. Brianna's life. My life. I selected the items carefully, placing them in a simple manila envelope. Then I added a USB drive containing videos I'd digitized years ago. Birthdays, school plays, graduation. Moments where Brianna had called me mom without hesitation, before Beverly Hills and Blake Easton rewrote our history. I dressed simply. Jeans, a blue blouse, sensible shoes. I knew. Blake and Brianna wouldn't be home. After gala nights, they always slept in, then went for brunch at the Beverly Hills Hotel around 11 a.m. It was their Saturday ritual, one I'd learned to work around. The main house was silent as I used my key to enter through the kitchen. The staff had weekends off unless there was an event, another detail of their lives I'd memorized. I placed the envelope on. The kitchen island centered perfectly on the white marble countertop where it couldn't be missed. I didn't leave a note. The contents would speak for themselves. As I turned to leave, my eyes caught on a photograph displayed prominently in the hallway. Blake and Brianna on their wedding day, with Diane standing proudly beside them. I wasn't in the frame. I'd been there, of course, seated in the, second row, not with the family. The photographer had taken shots with me included, but none of those made it into the official album or onto the walls. For a brief moment, I considered taking the photo, shattering the glass, making them see what they'd done. But that wasn't who I was. Destruction wasn't my language. Truth was. I locked the door behind me and walked to the gate where I'd scheduled another rideshare. I carried only one suitcase. I'd never accumulated much. The guest house had been furnished when I moved in, and most of my possessions could fit into a single bag. A life of service doesn't leave room for excess. The driver loaded my suitcase into the trunk without comment. "Airport?" he asked. "No," I replied. "Downtown, please. Hope Towers. My sister's best friend. Gloria had offered me her spare room years ago when I'd first considered moving out of the tiny apartment Brianna and I had shared. I'd declined then, believing I needed to provide stability for my niece. Now I was finally accepting. As the car pulled away from the Easton estate, I didn't look back. I didn't need to see the Tesla parked in the circular driveway, gleaming in the morning sun like a trophy. Instead, I looked forward, toward a life where I wasn't an afterthought or a punchline. My phone buzzed with a notification, a friend request from someone I didn't recognize, followed by a message. Ms. Miller, I'm Jordan Chen from the Daily Social. Someone anonymously uploaded content about you and the Easton family. We'd like to talk. So it had begun already. I hadn't uploaded anything myself. I'd simply left the envelope with its contents, including the USB drive. Someone in the house must have viewed it and made decisions of their own. Perhaps the housekeeper, Maria, who had always treated me with genuine respect. Or perhaps Blake himself, curious about what I might have left behind. I ignored the message. This wasn't about revenge or publicity. It was about truth, and truth doesn't need a spokesperson. By noon, my phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. I silenced it and focused on settling into Gloria's spare room, a modest space with a single bed and a small desk overlooking the city. It wasn't Beverly Hills, but it felt more like home than the guest house ever had. You sure about this, Francis? Gloria asked as she helped me unpack. At 60, she had the energy of someone decades younger, her silver-streaked hair cut in a stylish bob, her brown skin barely lined despite years of laughter and tears. You know you can stay as long as you need, but that girl's gonna come looking for you. Maybe, I said, carefully arranging my few books on the shelf Gloria had cleared for me. Or maybe she won't notice I'm gone until dinner time when no one's there to listen to her day. Gloria snorted. You raised her better than that. I thought I did, I replied softly. We were interrupted by Gloria's television, which she kept on for background noise. The entertainment news was running a special segment, Easton family drama, Forgotten Mother Speaks Truth. Gloria and I froze, watching as clips from my home videos played across the screen. Brianna at 8, missing her front teeth, beaming as she opened the birthday present I'd worked overtime to afford. Brianna at 16, crying after her first heartbreak while I held her. Brianna at 21, in her cap and gown, hugging me tightly and whispering, "We did it, Mom. We really did it." Interspersed with these intimate moments were images from last night's gala. Blake, presenting the Tesla to Diane, followed by the coin purse moment, my face a mask of dignity, hiding devastation. Sources close to the family say Frances Miller, who raised Blake Easton's wife from age 5 after her mother's death, was living in the Easton guest house until this morning, when she mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind evidence of her decades of sacrifice, the reporter explained. The story has gone viral, with Justice for Frances trending nationwide. Gloria muted the TV and looked at me, her eyes wide. Frances Miller, what did you do? I didn't do anything, I said truthfully. I just stopped hiding. My phone rang, Brianna's ringtone. After 25 years of always answering her calls, no matter the time or circumstance, I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again, and again, and again. Finally, I answered. Yes, Auntie? Brianna's voice was trembling. What's happening? There are reporters outside our house. Blake's publicist is having a meltdown. Mom, please, what did you do? Mom. She only called me that now when she needed something. I left something at the house this morning, I said calmly. Just some old memories. The videos are everywhere, she cried. Someone leaked everything. Blake's furious. His mother is threatening to sue for defamation. Please, you have to come back and fix this. Fix this. As if I were still the housekeeper, expected to clean up messes and make problems disappear. I can't fix how you feel about me, Brianna, I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. And I can't fix how you let them treat me. It was just a stupid gift, she protested. Blake didn't mean anything by it. It wasn't about the gift, I replied. It was about becoming invisible in my own family. It was about you standing by while they erased everything we were to each other. Silence stretched between us, filled with 25 years of love and now disappointment. Where are you? She finally asked. Somewhere I'm valued, I answered. Goodbye, Brianna. I ended the call and turned to Gloria, who was watching me with a mixture of concern and pride. You know they're not going to let this go, right? She said. Rich folks hate being embarrassed more than anything. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. I know, but for the first time in decades, that's not my problem to solve. Outside, Gloria's window, the Los Angeles skyline glittered in the afternoon sun, vast and full of possibilities. I had raised a child, worked countless jobs, built a life from nothing but determination and love, and now, at 52, I was finally choosing myself. Whatever came next, I would face it standing tall. By Sunday morning, the story had exploded. Justice for Frances was trending across all social media platforms, and my phone buzzed constantly with messages from reporters, morning show producers, and even a few literary agents asking if I wanted to tell my side of the story. I declined them all. This wasn't about publicity or profit. It was about dignity. Gloria brought coffee and toast to the small balcony off her apartment, where I sat watching the city wake up. The morning air was cool, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of jasmine from the potted plants Gloria tended with maternal care. Channel 7 called again, she said, sliding into the chair beside me, offering a live interview segment, exclusive. I shook my head. I'm not interested. Might be good to control the narrative, Gloria suggested, sipping her coffee, before the Eastons spin this their way. Let them spin, I replied. The truth is already out there. My phone lit up with Brianna's face, a photo taken on her graduation day, her smile radiant with pride and promise. I'd kept the same contact image for years, unable to replace it even as she changed. I answered on the third ring. Hello? Auntie Frances? Her voice was small, almost childlike. Can we talk? In person? I hesitated. Memories of every time I'd dropped everything to be there for her flashing through my mind. I don't think that's a good idea right now. Please, she whispered. I'm alone. Blake's with his PR team, and I need to see you. The maternal instinct I'd cultivated for 25 years pulled at my heart. Where? Anywhere but here. The press is camped outside our gate. I suggested a small cafe in Echo Park. Neutral territory. Public enough to discourage a scene, but quiet enough for a real conversation. 2:00, I said. Thank you, Brianna replied, relief evident in her voice. And Frances? I'm sorry. I ended the call without acknowledging her apology. Sorry was a beginning, not an end. Gloria raised an eyebrow. You sure about this? No, I admitted. But she's still my girl. The cafe was tucked between a vintage bookstore and a record shop, its patio shaded by canvas umbrellas in faded blues and greens. I arrived 20 minutes early, selecting a corner table with a clear view of both entrances. Old habits. Brianna arrived precisely at 2, wearing oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low over her face, her incognito outfit. I would have recognized her anywhere, though. I knew the set of her shoulders, the way she scanned a room before entering, habits I'd instilled in her from childhood. She spotted me and froze momentarily, as if unsure of her welcome. Then she straightened her spine, another habit learned from me, and approached. Thank you for coming, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Up close, I could see the toll the past 24 hours had taken on her. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, visible even behind the designer sunglasses. Her normally perfect manicure was chipped, her hair hastily pulled back. You look tired, I said, the maternal observation slipping out before I could stop it. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. That's what you notice? Not the media firestorm, or the fact that Blake's mother has threatened to disown him if he doesn't handle this? I notice my child is exhausted, I replied simply. Everything else is secondary. The waitress arrived, and Brianna ordered a latte with almond milk. I asked for plain black coffee. When the waitress left, silence settled between us, heavy with unspoken words. Why did you do it? Brianna finally asked, removing her sunglasses to look me directly in the eyes, something she hadn't done in months. Why now? I didn't upload those videos, I said truthfully. I left them at your house, yes. What happened after that wasn't my doing. But you knew something would happen, she pressed. You knew it would hurt us. Hurt me. I took a slow breath. Do you remember your 16th birthday? You wanted that blue dress from Nordstrom, the one with the silver threading. She nodded, confusion crossing her features at the apparent change of subject. It cost $200, I continued, more than our grocery budget for the month. But you'd worked so hard that semester bringing your math grade up from a C to an A. You deserved something special. The waitress returned with our coffees. I waited until she was gone before continuing. I cleaned 3 extra houses that week, worked through a fever on Thursday, skipped dinner for 5 nights straight, Also, you could have that dress and feel beautiful at your birthday dinner. I remember, Brianna whispered, her eyes softening with the memory. You said you weren't hungry. I believed you. You were supposed to, I said. That's what mothers do. They shield their children from the cost of love. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the bitter warmth fortify me. When Blake gave me that coin purse, with that comment about being frugal, saving pennies, do you know what I thought about? All those meals I skipped, all those extra shifts, all those small sacrifices that made your life possible. Brianna's eyes filled with tears. I never asked you to do that. You never had to ask. I replied gently. But you did have to remember. And somewhere between Stanford and Beverly Hills, you forgot. A tear slipped down her cheek. What do you want from me, Frances? Nothing, I said honestly. I don't want anything from you. That's the point. For 25 years, I gave without expectation of return. But I did expect respect. Not gratitude, respect. Blake didn't mean to disrespect. You, she tried. But the defense sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Yes, he did, I corrected her. And you let him. That's why I left the videos and photos. Not for revenge, but as a reminder of who we were before his world made us both small. Brianna wiped her tears with a napkin. Everyone's talking about it. Blake's investors are concerned about his family values image. The foundation. Donors are asking questions. His mother is beside herself. And you? I asked. What are you beside? She looked up, startled by the directness of the question. I'm ashamed, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Of myself, of how I've been, of what I allowed to happen to us. It was the first honest thing she'd said in months, and something in my chest loosened at the sound of it. Blake wants to make this right, she continued. He's prepared to offer you. I held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. I don't want his money. But you deserve compensation for what? I interrupted. For raising you? For loving you? That was never a transaction, Brianna. You can't fix this with a check or a public apology or a damage control campaign. Then what do you want? She asked, desperation edging into her voice. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze steadily. I want you to remember who you are, who we are. The rest will follow. Brianna reached across the table, her fingers hovering uncertainly above mine. I don't know if I can fix this. You don't have to fix anything, I said, neither accepting nor rejecting her outstretched hand. You just have to choose who you'll be. From this moment forward, she withdrew her hand slowly, nodding as she absorbed my words. Where will you stay? You can't live with Gloria forever. I'll figure it out, I said. I always do. You shouldn't have to figure it out alone, she whispered. Not after everything. I smiled sadly. Sometimes being alone is exactly what you need to remember your own voice. We finished our coffees in silence, the weight of 25 years and one humiliating night suspended between us. When it was time to leave, Brianna stood awkwardly, as if unsure whether to hug me or shake my hand. I'll call you, she said finally. I'll answer, I promised. It was as much commitment as I could offer right now. As I watched her walk away, shoulders straight despite the burden she carried, I felt a curious lightness. For the first time in decades, I wasn't responsible for solving someone else's problems. I had only myself to answer to. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was exactly what I needed. On Monday morning, Gloria nudged me awake at 7 a.m., her expression a mixture of excitement and apprehension. You need to see this, she said, thrusting her tablet into my hands. The screen displayed the homepage of the Los Angeles Times. The headline made my heart stutter. Easton, heir under fire. Former housekeeper reveals pattern of workplace abuse. What? I scrolled frantically through the article, which detailed allegations from multiple former Easton household staff members, drivers, housekeepers, personal assistants, all claiming mistreatment, from verbal abuse to wage theft. This isn't about me, I said, looking up at Gloria in confusion. She sat on the edge of the bed, her weight creating a comfortable dip in the mattress. It is, and it isn't. Your story opened the floodgates. These people have been afraid to speak up for years. Now they feel like someone might actually listen. I continued reading, my stomach nodding as I recognized names. Maria, who had cleaned the Easton home for 15 years. Carlos, who had maintained their fleet of luxury vehicles. Lena, who had served as Diane's personal assistant until being fired for taking a sick day. I never meant for this to happen, I whispered. Gloria patted my knee. Maybe you didn't, but maybe it needed to happen anyway. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. Ms. Miller, this is Rebecca Winters from the morning show. We'd like to invite you to speak about your experience with the Easton family. Before I could decline, she continued, we're also hosting representatives from the Domestic Workers Alliance who were inspired by your story. They believe you could help shine a light on the invisible labor that makes privileged lives possible. I hesitated, thinking of all. The women like me, immigrants, single mothers, caretakers who worked in shadows, who raised other people's children while struggling to provide for their own. Women whose sacrifices went unacknowledged, whose dignity was compromised daily in subtle and not-so-subtle ways. I'll consider it, I said finally. Send me the details. After ending the call, I sat in silence, processing the unexpected turn of events. What had begun as a personal stand for dignity had somehow evolved into something larger than myself. You going to do it? Gloria asked. I don't know, I admitted. I never wanted to be a spokesperson. I just wanted to be respected. Sometimes the most powerful statements are the ones we make without intending to, she replied, wisdom earned through her own lifetime of navigating systems designed to diminish her worth. My phone buzzed again, Blake Easton's number. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Curiosity won. Hello, Blake, I said coolly. Francis. His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. I believe we're doing that now. In person, he insisted. This has gone far enough. My family's reputation is being damaged by these exaggerations. Exaggerations? I repeated, heat rising in my chest. Like how you exaggerated my frugality to make me a punchline at your gala. A beat of silence. That was unfortunate. I apologize if you were offended. If I was offended? I echoed, the non-apology igniting something fierce within me. I wasn't offended, Blake. I was dehumanized. There's a difference. Look, he said, impatience creeping into his tone. I'm willing to make this right. A new car, a proper apartment in the city, a monthly stipend, whatever it takes to end this media circus. The offer was substantial, life-changing for someone who had lived paycheck to paycheck for decades. But the conditional nature of his generosity revealed everything I needed to know about Blake Easton's character. I don't want your money, I said firmly. And I haven't spoken to any media outlets. Then who leaked those videos? He demanded. Who contacted our former staff? Who orchestrated this attack on my family? The truth isn't an attack, Blake, I replied. And perhaps your staff spoke up because they recognized something familiar in my experience. He scoffed. These people were well compensated. If they had complaints, they should have raised them through proper channels. Like your human resources department? I asked. The one headed by your mother's best friend? Or perhaps they should have hired attorneys with the minimum wage you paid them? This conversation is pointless, Blake snapped. I'm trying to be reasonable here, Francis, but my patience has limits. If you continue this vendetta— It's not a vendetta, I interrupted. It's a reckoning, and I didn't start it. You did, the moment you decided my worth could be measured by a $12 coin purse. I ended the call before he could respond, my hands shaking but my resolve stronger than ever. Gloria watched me with knowing eyes. He offered money? I nodded. And you turned it down. It wasn't a question. Some things can't be bought, I said simply. Later that afternoon, I received a text from Brianna. Blake is talking about legal action. Please call me. We need to fix this before it gets worse. I didn't respond immediately, taking time to consider my position. I had no interest in prolonging a public spectacle, but neither would I be silenced by threats. After careful thought, I replied, There's nothing to fix, Brianna. The truth is already out there. What happens next depends on how you and Blake choose to respond to it. Minutes later, my phone rang. Brianna again. He's serious, Francis, she said without preamble. His lawyers are drafting cease and desist letters for the media outlets running these stories. They're talking about suing for defamation, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. I haven't spoken to any media, I reminded her. I haven't made any public statements. But you left those videos, she countered. You must have known someone would leak them. I left them for you, I said quietly, as a reminder of who we were. What happened after that wasn't my doing. Silence stretched between us. Then, almost inaudibly, she asked, Do you hate me now? The question caught me off guard, piercing straight through my carefully constructed composure. Hate you? Brianna, I raised you. I loved you when you had night terrors and when you failed algebra and when you broke curfew. I loved you through every mistake and triumph. That doesn't just disappear. But I hurt you, she whispered. I let them hurt you. Yes, I acknowledged. You did. And that's something you'll have to reconcile with yourself. I don't know how, she admitted, her voice breaking. I don't know how to fix any of this. For the first time since the gala, I felt a genuine surge of compassion for her. Not the habitual maternal protection I'd operated from for decades, but a recognition of her genuine struggle. Start by remembering who you are, I said gently. Not Blake Easton's wife or Diane's daughter-in-law, just Brianna, the girl who wrote in her college application essay that her greatest inspiration was the aunt who taught her that dignity doesn't depend on dollars. A soft sob came through the phone. I remember writing that. I still have a copy, I told her. It's in the box I left behind. I'll find it, she promised. And Francis, I miss you. I miss you too, I said, meaning it. But this separation is necessary. For both of us. After we hung up, I sat with my thoughts, trying to make sense of the whirlwind my life had become. What had started as a private act of self-respect had somehow catalyzed a public conversation about invisible labor, wealth disparity, and the human cost of privilege. I hadn't asked for this platform, but now that I had it, perhaps there was a responsibility to use it wisely. That evening, I emailed Rebecca Winters at the morning show. I'm ready to talk. Not about the Eastons specifically, but about the larger issues at play. About dignity, respect, and the value of care work in America. She responded within minutes. We'll see you Wednesday. Your voice matters, Ms. Miller. For the first time in decades, I truly believed that it did. Wednesday morning arrived with a nervous flutter in my stomach that reminded me of the day I'd first taken Brianna to kindergarten. That same mixture of fear and determination, of stepping into the unknown while knowing there was no going back. Gloria helped me select an outfit for the television appearance. A simple, blue dress with a modest neckline, professional without being severe. You look like yourself, she said approvingly as I turned before her full-length mirror. That's all I want to be, I replied, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the fabric. Just myself. The morning show sent a car, a courtesy I wasn't accustomed to. The driver opened my door with formal respect, addressing me as Ms. Miller, in a tone that suggested I was someone important. It was a strange feeling after decades of being the invisible person in the room. At the studio, I was whisked into hair and makeup, where skilled hands transformed my appearance subtly, enhancing rather than masking, the makeup artist explained. We want you to look like you, just the best version, she said kindly. Rebecca Winters met me in the green room, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a warm smile that didn't quite match their intensity. Thank you for coming, Ms. Miller. This segment has generated more pre-show buzz than anything we've done this quarter. I'm not here for buzz, I reminded her. I'm here to talk about the bigger picture. Of course, she agreed quickly. We've also invited Sophia Mendez from the Domestic Workers Alliance. She'll join the conversation about halfway through. A production assistant appeared with a clipboard. 5 minutes, Ms. Winters. Rebecca turned to me. Any last questions? Will the Eastons be mentioned specifically? I asked. We can't ignore the catalyst for this conversation, she replied diplomatically, but we'll follow your lead on how deeply to discuss your personal experience. The set was brighter than I'd imagined, lights positioned at angles that seemed designed to illuminate every imperfection. The host, James Crawford, greeted me with practiced charm, his handshake firm but brief. We're thrilled to have you, Francis, he said as a technician attached my microphone. Just be yourself and we'll have a great conversation. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, then a silent finger point, and we were live. Good morning, America, James began, his voice shifting to a more resonant timbre. Today we're joined by Francis Miller, whose story has captivated the nation and sparked an important conversation about respect, dignity, and the often invisible labor that powers wealthy households across America. He turned to me. Francis, thank you for being here. For those who haven't been following this story, can you tell us a bit about your experience? I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze steadily. I raised my niece from the age of 5 after my sister passed away. For 25 years, I worked multiple jobs to give her opportunities I never had. When she married into a wealthy family, I was invited to live in their guest house. Last week, at a charity gala, her husband publicly humiliated me with a gift that made light of my lifetime of sacrifice, a novelty coin purse, presented as a joke about my frugality. "And how did that make you feel?" James prompted. "Invisible," I answered simply, as if the 25 years I spent raising a child, working multiple jobs, sacrificing my own dreams, could be reduced to a punchline about saving pennies. "You left evidence of your sacrifices at their home the next morning," James continued. "Videos, photos, financial records. Did you intend for those to be made public?" "No," I said firmly. "I left them as a reminder for my niece of who we were before her new world made us both forget. What happened after that wasn't my doing." James nodded thoughtfully. "Yet the impact has been extraordinary. Justice for Frances has been trending for days. Former employees of wealthy families across the country are coming forward with similar stories. Why do you think your experience has resonated so deeply?" "Because it's not just my experience," I replied. "There are millions of women, often women of color, immigrants, single mothers, who provide the care work that makes privileged lives possible. They raise children who aren't their own, maintain homes they'll never own, sacrifice their own family's time to serve others, and they do it while being treated as if they're invisible." At this point, Sofia Mendez joined the conversation, a formidable woman in her 40s with a calm, authoritative presence. "What Frances is describing is the reality for over 2 million domestic workers in America," she explained. "Nannies, housekeepers, home health aides, predominantly women who lack basic labor protections, fair wages, and most importantly, basic dignity in their working conditions." The conversation flowed naturally from there, touching on domestic worker legislation, the value of care work, and the invisible labor that upholds society's most fundamental structures. "It's not about money," I emphasized when James asked what I hoped would change. "It's about recognition. It's about looking the people who care for your children, clean your homes, and tend to your elderly in the eye and seeing them as fully human." "And what would you say to the Easton family now?" James asked, the question I'd been dreading. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I would say that true wealth isn't measured in Teslas or mansions or foundation galas. It's measured in how you treat the people who can do nothing for you in return." As the segment concluded, James thanked me for my courage and dignity in sharing my story. The phrase struck me as ironic. I hadn't done anything courageous. I'd simply stopped accepting disrespect. In the green room, afterward, my phone lit up with notifications. Sophia approached, extending her business card. "We could use a voice like yours at the Alliance," she said. "If you're interested in advocacy work, call me." I accepted the card, oddly moved by the gesture. For decades, I'd been the one seeking employment, grateful for any opportunity. Now I was being recruited, valued for my perspective rather than my labor. Rebecca rushed in, eyes bright with excitement. "That was extraordinary, Frances. We've already had calls from 3 major networks wanting to book you. There's talk of a book deal. Your story has touched a nerve." "It's not just my story," I reminded her. "It's the story of millions." "Exactly," she agreed, "which is why people want to hear more. Will you consider additional appearances?" I thought about it, the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. If my voice could help others like me be seen, heard, respected, didn't I have an obligation to use it? "I'll consider it," I said finally, "but on one condition. I want to focus on solutions, not just problems, and I won't demonize the Eastons further. This isn't about revenge." Rebecca nodded, though I caught the flash of disappointment in her eyes. Scandal sold better than solutions, after all. As I left the studio, the driver who had brought me was waiting. "Back to Miss Gloria's, Miss Miller?" he asked. "Yes, please," I replied, settling into the back seat with a weary sigh. My phone buzzed with a text from Brianna. "I saw the interview. You were amazing. I'm proud of you. Can we talk later?" The simple message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. After everything, she was still my girl. But our relationship had fundamentally changed, perhaps for the better. For the first time, she was seeing me not just as her caretaker, but as a woman with her own voice, her own dignity, her own story worth telling. "Yes," I texted back. "Tonight." As the car navigated through Los Angeles traffic, I gazed out at the city that had been my home for decades. I'd always seen it through the lens of survival, which bus routes were most reliable, which neighborhoods had affordable groceries, which houses needed cleaning services. Now I was seeing new possibilities. Not wealth or fame, Those held no appeal. But purpose, a platform, a chance to advocate for the dignity of work that had always been invisible. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but then very little in my life had gone according to plan, and perhaps that was exactly as it should be. The call from Brianna came at 7 that evening, just as I was helping Gloria prepare dinner. We'd fallen into an easy routine in the week I'd been staying with her. I cooked, she cleaned, we shared stories over simple meals that tasted better than any catered. A fare at the Easton estate. She wants to come over, I told Gloria after hanging up. Tonight? Gloria raised an eyebrow. Just her? Or is that husband of hers coming too? Just her, I confirmed. She says she needs to talk to me alone. Gloria stirred the soup simmering on the stove. Well, I can make myself scarce if you need privacy. No need, I assured her. Your family too. Brianna arrived at 8, looking nothing like the polished socialite who graced magazine covers at Blake's side. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face bare of makeup, her outfit casual, jeans and a Stanford sweatshirt I recognized from her college days. She looked younger, more like the girl I'd raised than the woman she'd become. Auntie, she said when I opened the door, the childhood term of endearment slipping out naturally. Then she caught herself. Frances, thank you for seeing me. I gestured her inside. You're always welcome. Gloria emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Hello, Brianna. It's been a while. Aunt Gloria, Brianna greeted her with genuine warmth. You look wonderful. Still kicking, Gloria replied with a wink. You hungry? We've got plenty. Brianna shook her head. No, Her stomach growled audibly, betraying her. Sit, Gloria commanded, already heading back to the kitchen. Food first, talk later. We settled around Gloria's small dining table, the intimate setting a stark contrast to the formal dining room at the Easton mansion, where staff served multi-course meals on designer china. Here, we ate. Homemade vegetable soup and fresh bread on mismatched dishes, and somehow it felt more nourishing than any gourmet meal. This is delicious, Brianna said after her first spoonful. I'd forgotten how good your soup is, Frances. Some things you don't forget, I replied, like how to feed people you love. A shadow crossed her face at my words. When we'd finished eating, Gloria tactfully retreated to her bedroom, leaving Brianna and me alone in the small living room. I saw your interview, she began, perching on the edge of the sofa. You were powerful, dignified, everything I should have been defending all along. I waited, giving her space to continue. Blake watched it too, she added. He was not pleased. He says you've made his family look like monsters. I never mentioned his family by name, I pointed out. You didn't have to, she replied. Everyone knows who you're talking about. The coin purse incident is all over social media. I leaned forward slightly. Brianna, what are you really here to say? She took a deep breath. Blake has filed for divorce. The news hit me like a physical blow. What? Why? He says I betrayed the family by not controlling you. She explained, her voice eerily calm. That I should have stopped you from leaving, from exposing them. That my loyalty should have been to him, not to you. And what do you think? I asked carefully. I think he's right, she said, surprising me. But then she continued, my loyalty should have been to my family, but he never understood that you are my family, my first family, my real family. Tears welled in her eyes. I forgot that for a while. I got caught up in the mansions and the galas and the magazine features. I wanted so badly to belong in his world that I let them erase our story. She pulled something from her bag, a worn envelope. I found this in the box you left, my college application essay. She unfolded the paper, the creases soft with age. My greatest inspiration, she read aloud, is not a famous leader or celebrity, but my Aunt Frances, who taught me that dignity doesn't depend on dollars. Her voice broke on the last word. I wrote that at 17. I believed it with my whole heart. When did I stop believing it? I moved to sit beside her, close but not touching. We all lose our way sometimes. I lost more than my way, she whispered. I lost myself, and I nearly lost you. She set the essay down carefully. Blake's mother is telling everyone you manipulated me, that you're jealous of their wealth, that you're trying to extort them. His lawyers are preparing a narrative to discredit you if you keep speaking publicly. I'm not surprised, I said. But I am, Brianna replied, a flash of the old fire in her eyes. I'm surprised at myself, for how long I let this go on, for how deeply I betrayed everything you taught me. She straightened her shoulders. I've told Blake I won't participate in any campaign against you. I've withdrawn my access to our joint accounts, enough to get my own apartment, restart my old career in public relations. You don't have to leave him, I said, though the words cost me. If you love him, I loved who I thought he was, she interrupted. Or maybe I loved what he represented. Success, security, status. But the man who could humiliate you like that, who could demand I choose him over the woman who raised me, that's not someone I can build a life with. She reached for my hand, her grip desperate. I'm so sorry, Francis, for everything, for how I let them treat you, for how I treated you, for forgetting who we are to each other. The apology was raw, unpolished, genuine in a way that carefully crafted public statements never could be. I squeezed her hand, feeling the familiar shape of it, the same hand I'd held crossing streets, bandaged after falls, guided through homework assignments. I forgive you, I said simply. She broke then, tears flowing freely. I pulled her into my arms, holding her as I had countless times throughout her childhood. She felt smaller somehow, more fragile than the confident society wife she'd become. When her tears subsided, she pulled back, wiping her face with embarrassment. I'm a mess. You're human, I corrected gently. And you're finding your way back to yourself. That's never a tidy process. She smiled weakly. What happens now? Now, I said, we both keep moving forward. Me with my advocacy work, you with whatever path you choose. But we do it as family again, supporting each other without erasing each other. Blake's lawyers will come after you, she warned. They're already building a case, claiming you orchestrated this whole media circus for financial gain. Let them, I replied with a calmness that surprised even me. The truth doesn't require defense. Brianna's phone buzzed insistently. She glanced at it, her expression darkening. It's Diane. She's been calling nonstop, trying to convince me to sign a statement supporting Blake's version of events. And will you? I asked. She silenced the phone, tucking it away decisively. No, I'm done letting other people write my story, or yours. We talked late into the night, rebuilding bridges that had been slowly crumbling for years. Not everything was resolved, not every hurt healed, but it was a beginning, honest and imperfect and real. When Brianna finally left, promising to call the next day, Gloria emerged from her bedroom with a knowing smile. Well? She prompted. Well? I echoed. It seems I've got my girl back. Gloria nodded approvingly. And it seems she's got herself back too. I slept deeply that night, more peacefully than I had in years. Whatever legal battles or public relations wars the Eastons might wage in the coming days, I had reclaimed something more valuable than any settlement or vindication they could offer or withhold. The truth of who I was, who Brianna was, who we were together. That truth was worth every sacrifice, every humiliation, every moment of invisibility I had endured. And now, finally, it was visible for all to see. The morning after Brianna's visit, I woke to find an email from Sofia Mendez of the Domestic Workers Alliance. We're hosting a legislative forum next week, she wrote. Lawmakers, activists, and workers discussing the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights. Would you consider being our keynote speaker? Your story has resonated with so many, and your voice could help advance protections for millions. I sat with the invitation for a moment, struck by the strange turns my life had taken. 2 weeks ago, I had been invisible. A woman who raised someone else's child, who lived in someone else's guest house, who existed in the margins of someone else's life story. Now, I was being asked to speak to lawmakers about policy changes that could impact millions. What do you think? I asked Gloria over coffee, showing her the email. She read it carefully, her expression thoughtful. I think you've spent your whole life taking care of other people. Maybe now you can help take care of a whole community. I nodded slowly. I think I'd like that. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from Easton Family Holdings, LLC. Inside was a formal cease and desist notice, demanding I immediately stop making false and defamatory statements about Blake Easton and his family, and threatening legal action if I continued my campaign of public humiliation. Gloria found me at the kitchen table, staring at the document. Bad news? Blake's lawyers, I explained, sliding the letter toward her. They want me to stop speaking publicly. She scanned the legal language, her eyebrows rising. They're claiming you orchestrated a media campaign to extort money from them? That's rich. It's intimidation, I said. They think they can scare me into silence. Gloria set the letter down firmly. So what are you going to do? I considered the question carefully. I had no resources for a legal battle against the Easton fortune. No connections to high-powered attorneys or crisis management firms. But I did have something they couldn't buy or bully. Truth. I'm going to speak at Sophia's forum, I decided. Not about the Easton specifically, but about the larger issues, about dignity and respect and the value of care work. They'll see that as defiance, Gloria warned. They'll see anything short of complete silence as defiance, I replied. And I've been silent long enough. Later that day, I called Sophia to accept her invitation. I should warn you, I added. I've received legal threats from my former family. If my participation creates complications for your organization, let me stop you right there, Sophia interrupted. The Alliance has excellent legal counsel. These intimidation tactics are familiar territory for us. The more they try to silence you, the more obvious it becomes that your voice matters. Her confidence bolstered my own. Then I'd be honored to speak at your forum. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Sophia connected me with policy experts who helped me understand the legislative landscape. I spoke with domestic workers from across the country, listening to their stories, finding the common threads that connected their experiences to mine. I was sitting at Gloria's kitchen table, reviewing my speech notes, when my phone rang with Brianna's ringtone. Have you checked your email? She asked without preamble. Not since this morning. Why? Blake's lawyers sent you a settlement offer, she explained. $500,000 in exchange for your silence. A non-disclosure agreement that would prevent you from ever discussing the family publicly again. I felt a chill despite the warm afternoon. How do you know this? Because they sent me a copy, she said, along with a note suggesting I help persuade you to be reasonable. I opened my laptop and found the email. Formal, impersonal, outlining terms that would effectively erase my voice in exchange for financial security I'd never known. What are you going to do? Brianna asked. I closed the laptop. I'm going to speak at the Domestic Workers Alliance Forum tomorrow. As planned. Francis, she said hesitantly, that's a lot of money. Money you earned. Money that could secure your future. At what cost? I asked. My silence? My integrity? The chance to help others who don't have the platform I've been given? She was quiet for a moment. You always taught me that principles matter more than profit. I want you to be taken care of. I am taken care of, I assured her. Not with mansions or luxury cars, but with purpose and community, and the knowledge that I'm using my voice for something that matters. After we hung up, I drafted a brief professional response to the settlement offer. I decline your proposal. While I have no interest in causing ongoing harm to your family, I will not be silenced about my experiences or prevented from advocating for domestic workers' dignity and rights. The response came within hours. Thinly veiled threats of defamation suits, personal reputation, damage, financial ruin. The tactics of powerful people accustomed to getting their way. I slept poorly that night, anxiety threading through my dreams. But when morning came, I dressed carefully in a simple blue suit Gloria had helped me select, applied minimal makeup, and prepared to face whatever consequences might come. The legislative forum was held at City Hall, a grand building with marble, columns and echoing halls. Sophia met me at the entrance, elegant and composed in a tailored pantsuit. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, I replied honestly. Inside, the meeting room was filled beyond capacity. Lawmakers, activists, domestic workers, and, to my surprise, a substantial media presence. Cameras lined the back wall, reporters scribbling in notebooks or tapping on tablets. Sophia followed my gaze. Your story has created unprecedented interest in our cause, she explained. We've been fighting for this legislation for years with minimal coverage. Now everyone wants to hear what we have to say. The forum began with policy experts outlining the proposed Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights, basic protections like overtime pay, meal breaks, paid sick leave, and safeguards against harassment and discrimination. Protections most workers took for granted, but which had never been extended to those who cleaned homes, cared for children, or tended to the elderly. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium with steady steps, placing my notes before me but finding I didn't need them. The words I needed to say were written not on paper, but on my heart. My name is Frances Miller, I began. For 25 years, I raised my niece while working as a housekeeper in the homes of wealthy families. I am one of millions of women, predominantly women of color, immigrants, and single mothers, who provide the care work that makes other people's success possible. I looked out at the sea of faces, finding unexpected strength in their attention. We cook meals we don't get to eat. We clean homes we don't get to live in. We raise children who will inherit wealth we can only imagine. And we do it all while being treated as if we're invisible. I shared stories from my own experience, working through illness because there was no paid sick leave, accepting verbal abuse because there were no harassment protections, watching employers break promises because verbal contracts held no legal weight. This isn't about one family or one incident, I emphasized. This is about a system that treats domestic labor as less valuable, less professional, less worthy of protection than other forms of work. A system that allows wealth and power to shield people from accountability when they mistreat those with less privilege. As I concluded my remarks, I noticed movement. At the back of the room, a familiar figure slipping in through the side door. Brianna, dressed simply but elegantly, her expression a mixture of pride and apprehension as she watched me speak. "Dignity isn't a luxury," I said, my voice strengthening. "It's a basic human right, and it's time our laws reflected that truth." The room erupted in applause. As I returned to my seat, Sophia squeezed my hand, whispering, "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." Later, as the forum concluded, reporters surrounded me, microphones extended, questions overlapping. I answered thoughtfully but carefully, keeping the focus on the legislation rather than my personal story. Brianna waited patiently until the media dispersed, then approached with a tentative smile. "You were magnificent," she said. Every word was true and necessary. "Thank you for coming," I replied, genuinely moved by her presence. "It means a lot." "I wouldn't have missed it," she said. Then, more hesitantly, "Blake's lawyers called. They saw the media coverage. They're not happy." "I expected as much." She took a deep breath. "I've been offered a position at the PR firm I worked at before I married Blake. It's a step down from where I was, but it's a start. I'm taking it." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "And," she continued, "I'm working with my own lawyer now. The divorce will be complicated, but I'm not backing down. I've made it clear I won't participate in any legal action against you." I hugged her then, this woman child who had been the center of my world for so long. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. "So proud." As we parted, Sophia approached with a man I didn't recognize, distinguished, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Frances, this is Stephen Garrison, a partner at Civil Rights Legal Collective. He'd like to speak with you." "Ms. Miller," Stephen said, extending his hand, "my firm would be honored to represent you pro bono in any legal matters arising from your advocacy work. What you're doing is too important to be silenced by intimidation tactics." As I accepted his card, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't alone in this fight. I had allies, resources, support, things I'd never had in my battles before. The path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, I wasn't walking it in silence or in shadows. I was walking in the light, my voice clear, my purpose certain, and that made all the difference. The media coverage following the legislative forum exceeded anything I could have imagined. My speech was featured on national news broadcasts, clips shared millions of times across social media platforms. Domestic dignity began trending alongside justice for Frances. Stephen Garrison proved to be as good as his word. When Blake's attorneys escalated their threats, sending a formal notice of intent to sue for defamation, Stephen responded with calm professionalism, pointing out that truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims and suggesting that discovery proceedings would be illuminating for all parties involved. The threats quieted after that, though they didn't disappear entirely. 3 weeks after the forum, Sophia called with unexpected news. "The Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights is being fast-tracked in the state legislature," she said, excitement evident in her voice. "Your testimony created momentum we haven't been able to generate in years. They want you to speak at the committee hearing next month." "Me?" I asked, surprised. "Surely there are more qualified experts." "Experts we have in abundance," Sophia interrupted. "What we've lacked is someone who could make people care. You did that, Frances. You put a face and a voice to an issue that's been invisible for too long." The realization that my personal stand for dignity had evolved into something much larger was both humbling and empowering. I'd never sought a public platform, never imagined myself as an advocate. Yet here I was, speaking for those who had long been voiceless. I accepted Sophia's invitation, and in the weeks that followed, threw myself into learning everything I could about the legislative process, the specific provisions of the bill, and the lived experiences of domestic workers across the state. I spoke with housekeepers, nannies, home health aides, women who shared stories so similar to mine that it sometimes felt like looking in a mirror. Gloria watched my transformation with quiet pride. "You're blooming," she observed one evening as I practiced my testimony at her kitchen table. "Like a flower that's finally getting enough sunlight." I smiled at the metaphor. I spent so many years focusing on Brianna's growth that I forgot I was still growing too. "It's never too late to become who you were meant to be," she replied with the wisdom of her 70 years. The day before the committee hearing, I received an unexpected visitor. I was reviewing my notes in Gloria's living room when the doorbell rang. Gloria answered, then called to me with surprise in her voice. "Francis, it's Diane Easton." I froze, momentarily disbelieving. Then I rose, smoothing my slacks with suddenly damp palms, and went to the door. Diane stood in the hallway, impeccably dressed as always in a designer suit, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, diamonds glinting at her ears and wrist. But something was different. The imperious confidence that had always characterized her presence was muted somehow, her posture less commanding. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice carefully modulated. After a moment's hesitation, I stepped aside. "Of course." Gloria gave me a questioning look. "I'll be in my room if you need me," she said, her emphasis on the last 3 words making it clear she was ready to intervene if necessary. Once we were alone, Diane perched on the edge of the sofa, her Hermes handbag clutched in manicured fingers. "I won't take much of your time," she began. "I know you're busy with your advocacy work." The slight pause suggested she'd considered and rejected a less flattering term. "What can I do for you, Diane?" I asked, remaining standing. She drew a careful breath. "I've come to ask you to consider the impact of your continued public speaking on my family, on Blake's business interests, on our foundation work. I haven't mentioned your family by name in any of my public appearances," I pointed out. "You don't have to," she replied. "Everyone knows. The story has taken on a life of its own." I studied her face, noting the fine lines that her expensive skincare couldn't quite erase, the tension at the corners of her mouth. "What is it you want from me?" "Discretion," she said. "Privacy. A chance for this whole unfortunate incident to fade from public memory." "This whole unfortunate incident?" I repeated slowly. "You mean the systematic devaluation of my worth and dignity? The erasure of my role in Brianna's life? The public humiliation at your gala?" Color rose in her cheeks. "That was regrettable. Blake's attempt at humor was poorly executed. For that, I apologize." The apology was so clearly rehearsed, so obviously strategic rather than sincere, that it almost made me laugh. "This isn't about a bad joke, Diane. It's about a pattern of behavior that reflects how society as a whole treats domestic workers and caregivers." "You were hardly a domestic worker," she protested. "You were family." "Was I?" I asked quietly. "Was I family when you corrected my table manners at dinner parties? When you suggested I use the service entrance at events? When you edited me out of family photographs?" She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Cultural differences can be challenging to navigate." "It wasn't culture that separated us," I corrected her. "It was respect. Or rather, the lack of it." Diane's composure slipped slightly, frustration bleeding through her polished veneer. "What do you want, Francis? Money? A public apology? A place on our foundation board? Just tell me what it will take to end this crusade of yours." The question revealed so much about her worldview, the assumption that everyone had a price, that principles could be negotiated, that power and wealth could solve any problem. It was almost sad, in a way. "I don't want anything from you," I said honestly. "My advocacy isn't about the Eastons. It's about the millions of women who do essential work without basic protections or respect. If my story helps secure those protections, then everything I experienced, including that night at your gala, will have been worth it." She stared at me, genuinely perplexed by an agenda she couldn't quantify or control. "Blake was right about you," she said finally. "You're more formidable than you appear." "Most women are," I replied. Especially those who've had to build lives from nothing but hard work and hope. Diane stood, reclaiming her poise with visible effort. I won't take up more of your time, but I hope you'll remember that actions have consequences, Francis, for everyone involved. The implied threat was clear, but it held no power over me now. I remember that every day, I said, walking her to the door. It's why I'm speaking at the legislative hearing tomorrow. After she left, Gloria emerged from her bedroom, eyebrows raised. Well, what did Her Majesty want? For me to disappear quietly, I replied. To stop rocking the boat. Gloria snorted. Some boats need rocking. They do, I agreed. And some need to be capsized entirely. The next morning, I arrived at the state capitol building with Sophia and Stephen. The hearing room was packed with supporters wearing blue buttons that read, "Dignity is not optional, and care work is real work." Many were domestic workers who had taken rare days off to attend, their presence a powerful testament to the importance of the legislation. The committee members listened attentively as experts presented data on wage theft, workplace injuries, and harassment experienced by domestic workers. Sophia outlined the specific provisions of the bill, answering technical questions with practiced ease. When my turn came, I approached the microphone with the calm certainty that had become my new normal. My name is Frances Miller, I began, and for most of my life, I was invisible. I shared my story not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a witness, testifying to a systemic injustice. I spoke of raising Brianna while cleaning other people's homes, of working without contracts or protections, of the cumulative impact of being treated as less than by employers who benefited from my labor. The woman who raises your children, who cares for your aging parents, who maintains your home, she is not invisible, I concluded. She is essential. And it's time our laws recognized that truth. The committee voted unanimously to advance the bill to the full legislature. Outside the Capitol, reporters gathered for impromptu interviews. As I answered questions about the legislation's potential impact, I noticed a familiar figure standing at the edge of the crowd, Brianna, watching with undisguised pride. When the media dispersed, she approached, embracing me warmly. "You were amazing," she said. "You always are." "Thank you for coming," I replied, genuinely touched by her presence. "I wouldn't have missed it," she assured me. Then, more hesitantly, "My mother came to see you yesterday." I nodded. "She did. She told Blake you were unreasonable," Brianna said with a hint of dark humor, "that you couldn't be managed." "I'll take that as a compliment," I replied. Brianna laughed, the sound freer and more genuine than I'd heard from her in years. I'm learning to be a little unreasonable myself these days. The divorce proceedings have officially started. It's not pretty. "Are you okay?" I asked, maternal concern rising instinctively. "I'm better than okay," she said with surprising conviction. For the first time in years, I recognize myself when I look in the mirror. I'm Brianna Miller again, not just Blake Easton's wife. She linked her arm through mine as we walked toward the parking area. "I've leased an apartment not far from Gloria's. It's small, but it's mine. And I was hoping, maybe we could have dinner sometimes? Start rebuilding?" The simple request, so ordinary yet so profound, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I'd like that very much. As we parted ways, I was struck by the strange symmetry of our journeys. Both of us reclaiming identities that had been subsumed by the Easton world, both learning to stand in our own truth without apology. I had entered this chapter of my life seeking nothing more than basic respect. Now I found myself part of a movement larger than myself, my personal dignity, intertwined with a collective struggle for recognition and rights. It wasn't the life I had planned. It was something larger, more purposeful, more connected to the world around me. And for the first time in decades, I was truly, completely visible. Not just to others, but to myself. 6 months passed like a whirlwind. The Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights passed the state legislature with overwhelming support, a victory celebrated by advocates across the country. Other states began introducing similar legislation, with Sophia and the Alliance coordinating a nationwide effort that kept me traveling and speaking more than I ever had in my life. Through it all, Brianna and I carefully rebuilt our relationship, not as guardian and child, but as two women finding their way back to family. We had dinner together weekly, sometimes at her new apartment, sometimes at Gloria's, occasionally at small restaurants where we could talk without interruption. The divorce proceedings dragged on, Blake's attorneys employing every delay tactic possible. But Brianna stood firm, refusing to be intimidated or silenced. He offered me the Beverly Hills house if I'd sign an NDA about you and the family, she told me one evening as we shared pasta at her modest but charming apartment. Can you believe that? What did you say? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She twirled spaghetti around her fork with deliberate care. I told him I'd rather live in a studio apartment than a mansion built on silence. Pride swelled in my chest. You've changed. I've remembered, she corrected gently, who I was before, who you raised me to be. October brought an unexpected development. I was reviewing speaking requests with Sophia at the Alliance office when Stephen Garrison called. Blake Easton's legal team has reached out, he said without preamble. They want to discuss a settlement. My stomach tightened. What kind of settlement? That's the interesting part, Stephen replied. They're not asking for an NDA or any limitations on your advocacy work. They simply want to resolve any outstanding claims between the parties and move forward. Skepticism made me cautious. Why now? What's changed? Several things, potentially, Stephen explained. The foundation has lost significant donors due to the negative publicity. Blake's company is facing scrutiny from investors concerned about corporate culture. And there's a profile of Diane Easton scheduled in Vanity Fair next month that apparently doesn't paint her in the most flattering light. I considered this information carefully. What do they want from me? A meeting, Stephen said. Just you, Blake, and the respective attorneys. No press, no public statements. After consulting with Stephen and Sophia, I agreed to the meeting, though with limited expectations. It was scheduled for the following week at Stephen's office, neutral territory that still provided me with home court advantage. Blake arrived precisely on time, looking both familiar and strange, the same impeccable suit and confident posture, but with new lines around his eyes, a certain guardedness that hadn't been there before. His attorney, a severe woman with a reputation for ruthless efficiency, accompanied him. Ms. Miller, Blake greeted me with formal politeness. Thank you for agreeing to meet. We settled around Stephen's conference table, the attorneys handling initial formalities while Blake and I regarded each other warily across the polished surface. I'll be direct, Blake said once the preliminaries concluded. The events of the past 6 months have been challenging for all parties involved. I believe it's in everyone's interest to resolve any lingering tensions and move forward. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. His attorney slid a document across the table. A settlement agreement that includes financial compensation for emotional distress and reputational harm, without any restrictions on Ms. Miller's advocacy activities or public speaking. Stephen reviewed the document carefully, his expression revealing nothing. The financial terms are substantial, he noted, passing the agreement to me. The figure made me blink. 7 digits, far more than I had earned in my entire working life. But it was the absence of an NDA or gag clause that truly surprised me. Why? I asked Blake directly. Why now? And why without the silence you demanded before? Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the polished veneer. Because it doesn't work, he admitted. The harder we've tried to control this narrative, the worse it's become. And because, he hesitated, because some things can't be fixed with money or legal maneuvers. I studied him, searching for the calculation behind his words. Such as? Brianna won't speak to her mother, he said after a moment. She's refused all contact since learning about Diane's visit to you. The foundation board is fracturing. Longtime family friends are distancing themselves. You're concerned about your family relationships, I observed. Yes, he acknowledged. And about the legacy we're creating. Is it really worth destroying everything to avoid acknowledging a mistake? It was the closest thing to self-reflection I'd ever heard from Blake Easton. Not quite an apology, but a recognition that actions had consequences that couldn't always be managed with wealth or power. The settlement contains no admission of wrongdoing, his attorney interjected quickly, but does express regret for any distress caused by the events at the Foundation Gala. I glanced at Stephen, who gave a slight nod. I need time to consider this, I said. Of course, Blake agreed. Take whatever time you need. As the meeting concluded and we prepared to leave, Blake hesitated. Francis, he said, using my first name for perhaps the first time without condescension. For what it's worth, I've watched your advocacy work. It's impressive, impactful. The compliment was unexpected, awkward in its delivery, but seemingly genuine. Thank you, I replied simply. Later that evening, I sat with Gloria and Brianna in Gloria's living room, the settlement agreement on the coffee table between us. It's a lot of money, Gloria observed. Security you've never had. It is, I agreed, but it feels complicated. Brianna leaned forward, her expression serious. You don't need my permission, Francis. Whatever you decide, I support you. But your relationship with your mother-in-law, ex-mother-in-law, she corrected firmly. And that's separate from this. My issues with Diane are about who she is, not what she did to you. I touched the document thoughtfully. I never wanted revenge or compensation. I just wanted dignity. And you've claimed it, Gloria pointed out, with or without this money. The next day, I called Stephen with my decision. I'll accept the settlement, with one condition. Half the amount goes to the Domestic Workers Alliance to establish a legal defense fund for workers facing employment abuses. Stephen chuckled. I thought you might say something like that. I'll make it happen. The agreement was finalized within a week. The terms kept confidential by mutual consent. Not because I was forbidden to speak, but because I chose not to. This resolution wasn't about public vindication or revenge. It was about closing one chapter so another could begin. With my portion of the settlement, I made several careful decisions. I purchased a small but comfortable condo not far from Gloria's apartment, invested enough to provide modest but reliable income for my future, and established a scholarship fund for children raised by single parents or guardians, children like Brianna had been. The holiday season approached, bringing with it invitations to year-end celebrations with the Alliance and other advocacy groups. At one such event, held in a community center decorated with simple but festive lights, Sophia pulled me aside. I have news, she said, her expression bright with excitement. The National Domestic Workers Bill of Rights is being reintroduced in Congress next session, with bipartisan support. They want you to testify at the hearing in January. The opportunity to speak at the federal level, to help extend protections to millions of workers nationwide, was beyond anything I could have imagined when I'd stood in Blake's mansion holding that ridiculous coin purse. I'd be honored, I said, emotion making my voice unsteady. As the evening progressed, I found myself surrounded by women whose stories mirrored my own, women who had cleaned houses, raised children, cared for the elderly, all while being treated as invisible. Now they were visible to each other, to lawmakers, to society. And so was I. Brianna arrived late, coming directly from her office at the PR firm where she'd been steadily rebuilding her career. She hugged me warmly, then presented a small gift box. Early Christmas present, she explained. I couldn't wait. Inside was a delicate silver pendant, a key on a slender chain. It's like the one you used to wear, she said as I lifted it carefully. The one with the key to the box where you kept all our memories. I thought, maybe it could represent new memories now, new doors opening. I fastened it around my neck, the familiar weight settling against my collarbone like an old friend. It's perfect, I whispered, embracing her tightly. Later, as we shared dessert at a corner table, Brianna mentioned, casually, I saw Blake last week, finalizing some paperwork. He asked about you. Oh, I kept my tone neutral. He said he saw you on C-SPAN, testifying about the California legislation. Said you were remarkably articulate. She rolled her eyes. High praise from the great Blake Easton. I smiled slightly. Progress of a sort. He's different, she acknowledged. Not transformed or anything, but shaken. Having his worldview challenged hasn't been comfortable for him. Growth rarely is, I observed. As the evening drew to a close, I stood by the community center's windows, watching gentle rain illuminate the streetlights. In the reflection of the glass, I could see the room behind me, filled with women who had found their voices, their power, their community. 6 months ago, I had been invisible, a woman defined by her service to others, standing in a corner holding a glittery coin purse while the world looked past her. Now, I was seen, heard, valued. Not because I had changed, but because I had finally, after 52 years, allowed myself to step into the light. Washington, D.C. in January was bitterly cold, the kind of deep winter chill that seeps through layers of clothing and settles in your bones. But as I stood on the steps of the Capitol building with Sophia and a delegation from the Domestic Workers Alliance, I felt nothing but warmth, the heat of purpose, of belonging, of standing exactly where I was meant to be. Ready? Sophia asked, adjusting her scarf against the wind. I nodded, gripping my prepared testimony in gloved hands. As ready as I'll ever be. The why. Congressional hearing room was imposing. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, the weight of history and power in every architectural detail. Representatives from both parties sat behind an elevated dais, their expressions ranging from genuine interest to political calculation to barely concealed boredom. Sophia testified first, outlining the scope of the problem with precision and passion. Over 2 million domestic workers in America have no guaranteed sick leave, overtime protections, or safeguards against harassment and abuse, she explained. These are primarily women of color, immigrants, and single mothers who provide essential care work that makes all other work possible. When my turn came, I approached the microphone with steady steps, setting my written testimony aside. The words I needed to speak weren't on those pages. They were written in the years of my life. My name is Frances Miller, I began. For 25 years, I raised my niece while working as a housekeeper in wealthy homes across Los Angeles. I am one of millions of women who cook meals we don't get to eat, clean houses we don't get to own, and raise children who will inherit wealth we can only imagine. Shared my story not as a personal grievance, but as a window into a systemic problem, the devaluation of care work, the lack of basic protections, the invisible nature of labor performed primarily by women. When we speak of essential workers, I said, we often forget those most essential to our daily lives, the women who nurture our children, care for our elderly, and maintain our homes. This legislation isn't asking for special treatment. It's asking for the same basic protections afforded to virtually every other category of worker in America. The questions that followed were respectful, substantive, focused on the legislation rather than my personal experience. Even representatives known for their opposition to labor regulations engaged thoughtfully, perhaps recognizing the universal value of care work in their own lives. As the hearing concluded, several members of Congress approached to shake my hand, including the committee chairwoman, a formidable woman with 3 decades of public service behind her. Powerful testimony, Ms. Miller, she said warmly. You've put a human face on an issue that's been in the shadows for too long. Outside, reporters gathered for statements and reactions. I answered their questions thoughtfully, keeping the focus on the legislation rather than my personal story. As the media dispersed, I noticed a familiar figure waiting at the edge of the crowd. Brianna, bundled against the cold in a wool coat and colorful scarf. Surprise, she said, embracing me tightly. I wouldn't miss this for anything. How did you get away from work? I asked, delighted by her unexpected presence. I told them my mother was testifying before Congress, she replied with a smile. Technically true. My heart swelled at the word mother, spoken not as a slip or a manipulation, but as a simple acknowledgement of truth. We found a small cafe near the Capitol for a late lunch, warming our hands around steaming mugs of coffee as we debriefed the hearing. You were magnificent, Brianna said. So poised, so authentic. Even that senator from Alabama was nodding along. It's easier to speak your truth when you've already faced your worst fear, I reflected. After standing in that mansion holding a coin purse while everyone laughed, testifying before Congress seems almost straightforward. Brianna reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. I'm so sorry I didn't stand up for you that night. You've stood up for me every day since, I reminded her gently. And more importantly, you've stood up for yourself. The divorce had been finalized the previous month, with Brianna securing a fair settlement, despite the Eastons' attempts to punish her financially for her loyalty to me. She had moved forward with quiet dignity, rebuilding her career and her identity separate from the Easton name and fortune. I have news, she said, an undercurrent of excitement in her voice. I've been offered a position as communications director for the Women's Leadership Coalition. That's wonderful, I said sincerely. It's perfect for you. It is, she agreed, using my PR skills for something meaningful, something aligned with my actual values. And she hesitated briefly. They're particularly interested in my perspective as someone who's seen both sides, privilege and struggle. I nodded, understanding the unique bridge she represented between worlds that rarely intersected with genuine comprehension. There's something else, she added, a hint of nervousness creeping into her voice. I've met someone. His name is Daniel. He's a professor at UCLA, ethical economics of all things. Tell me about him, I encouraged, recognizing the significance of her sharing this new development. As she described this man who valued her mind and heart rather than her social connections, I saw a lightness in her that had been absent during her years with Blake, a genuine animation that came from being truly seen rather than strategically positioned. "He wants to meet you," she said, "if you're comfortable with that." "I'd like that very much," I assured her. Later that evening, as we walked along the National Mall, the monuments illuminated against the night sky, Brianna linked her arm through mine. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "The path your life took because of me?" The question stopped me. Regret. "Raising you? Never. Not for a single moment. But you gave up so much," she persisted. "Your own family, career opportunities, relationships. You lived in that tiny apartment for years so I could go to good schools." I considered her words carefully. "I made choices," I said finally. "Difficult ones sometimes, but they were my choices. And they brought me exactly where I needed to be, testifying before Congress, helping millions of women like me gain protections they deserve. Would that have happened if my life had taken a different path? I don't think so." She nodded slowly, absorbing my perspective. "Still, I want you to have everything now. All the things you postponed or sacrificed. I have exactly what I need," I assured her. "Purpose, community, family." I squeezed her arm gently. "You." We paused before the Lincoln Memorial, its massive columns glowing in the soft evening light. "I have something for you," Brianna said, reaching into her coat pocket. She withdrew a small box, similar to the one that had contained the key necklace she'd given me months earlier. Inside was a delicate charm, a tiny silver house. "For your necklace," she explained, "to represent your new home. Your new beginning." I added it to the chain beside the key, the symbols clicking gently together. "Perfect," I whispered. "Absolutely perfect." The next morning brought the culmination of our Washington visit, a White House forum on essential workers, where I was invited to participate in a panel discussion. The East Room was filled with labor advocates, policy experts, and cabinet officials, focused on workplace protections and economic justice. As I shared my perspectives, I was struck by the extraordinary journey that had brought me from invisibility to influence. Not fame or fortune, but the genuine ability to effect change for others who shared my experiences. The forum concluded with the president announcing support for the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights, a moment of victory that brought tears to Sophia's eyes and a sense of vindication to all who had fought for this recognition for decades. At the reception that followed, I found myself speaking with the Secretary of Labor, a woman whose own mother had worked as a housekeeper to support her education. "Your advocacy has been transformative," she told me. "Not just for the legislation, but for changing how people see this work as skilled, valuable, essential." "That's all I ever wanted," I admitted, "for us to be seen." As Brianna and I departed the White House grounds, a reporter approached for one final comment. "Ms. Miller, you've become the face of a movement that's reshaping labor policy in America. How does that feel?" I considered the question carefully. "It feels like restoration," I said finally. "Not just for me, but for millions of women whose dignity and contributions have been overlooked for too long." "And what would you say to the Easton family now?" she pressed. "To the people whose actions inadvertently launched your advocacy career?" Brianna tensed beside me, but I smiled gently. "I would say thank you," I replied simply. "Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as humiliation. Sometimes being reduced to nothing is exactly what you need to rebuild yourself into everything you were meant to be." The reporter seemed surprised by my lack of bitterness. "You've truly moved beyond that incident, then?" "I haven't moved beyond it," I corrected her. "I've moved through it, and it's moved through me. It's part of my story now, not as a wound, but as a doorway." Later that night, in the quiet of my hotel room, I stood at the window overlooking the capital city, lights twinkling against the darkness like earthbound stars. I touched the charms at my throat, the key representing my past, the house symbolizing my present. 6 months earlier, I had stood frozen in Blake Easton's mansion, clutching a ridiculous gift bag while the crowd laughed at my expense. I had felt invisible, diminished, erased by wealth and privilege that couldn't recognize the value of a life dedicated to care and sacrifice. Now I stood in Washington, D.C., having testified before Congress, participated in a White House forum, helped advance legislation that would protect millions. I was visible, not because I had changed, but because I had finally allowed the world to see who I had always been. The journey from that mansion to this moment hadn't been about revenge or vindication. It had been about restoration, of dignity, of voice, of purpose. I hadn't needed a Tesla to prove my worth. I hadn't needed wealth or status or public validation. I had only needed to remember who I was, a woman who had raised a child with love, who had worked with dignity, who had preserved her integrity even when the world tried to render her invisible. That remembering had been enough, more than enough. It had been everything.